Good morning. It is Tuesday, the 17th of February. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today. Your daily dose of European news and analysis, live here. Almost 4 years after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, more peace talks are set to take place in Geneva today between the Russians and the Ukrainians. The stakes are high, but expectations remain low, with President Trump piling pressure on Ukraine to budge, while Russia continues its bombardment on Ukrainian civilians. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, though, did tell the Munich Security Conference that he is still uncertain whether Russia is genuinely serious about ending the war in Ukraine. For more, we're joined here on set by our Ukraine correspondent, Sasha Vakalina. Good morning, Sasha. Look, first, any expectations for the talks today in Geneva?
Well, the talks are taking place after 2 rounds in Abu Dhabi. We do have the 3rd round of 2-day talks in Geneva, May. These are trilateral format. This is Ukraine, the US and Russia. And this is very important that they are taking place. Now, we've heard from the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, that he said that Moscow delegation intends to raise specifically the issues of territories, which is, of course, the most important sticking point there. When it comes to the Ukrainian delegation, Volodymyr Zelensky said that he intends also to raise the issue of possibility of energy ceasefire. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about that.
The more evil Russia is, the more difficult it will be to reach an agreement with them. Our partners must be aware of this. This applies above all to the United States. Soon, we will mark a year of Ukraine's most active diplomacy. We have agreed to all of America's realistic proposals, starting with the proposal to cease fire unconditionally and for the long term. Russia rejects this, continuing its assaults on the front lines and strikes on our cities and energy infrastructure.
Продовжуємо штурми на фронті та удари по наших містах, по енергетиці.
President Zelensky there. And meanwhile, President Zelensky is calling for more sanctions against Russia, Sasha.
He is indeed. In a bigger picture, what he's asking for the partners from the United States and from the European Union is to increase this pressure on Russia, because even on the day when the talks are starting in Geneva, this morning, Russia attacked Ukraine once again, specifically targeting civilian energy infrastructure in western Ukraine. So he is asking to increase pressure. And this time, he said, with all of the sanctions that the United States already implemented on Rosneft and Lukoil, he says now it is time for Washington to sanction Russia's nuclear energy and also people involved. And here President Zelensky dropped the F word there and the F bomb, May, when he said it is time for the people involved to go away to Russia, go home. You don't respect anybody in the United States. You don't respect the rules. You don't respect democracy. You don't respect Ukraine or Europe. So he does insist that these people should be under sanctions and they should not be allowed to be making money and staying and financing the lifestyle of themselves, of their families in Europe and the United States, while at the same time also financing Russia's war against Ukraine.
OK. President Zelensky there, not mincing his words. Sasha Vakalina, thank you so much for that update. And of course, this talk's taking place today in in Geneva about Iran as well. So for more updates, do take a look at Euronews.com and for more of Sasha Vakalina's reporting. But now, €5 billion. That's the amount member states of former US President Donald Trump's so-called Board of Peace have pledged for reconstruction and humanitarian efforts in Gaza. The European Union is considering joining as an observer, and the EU Commissioner Dubravka-Suica is set to travel to Washington, D.C. for the board's first ever meeting. This as Italy and Romania prepare to join as observers as well, stopping short of full membership. For more on Italy's motive, we can cross over to Rome now and bring in our correspondent, Georgia Orlandi. Good morning, Georgia. Thank you so much for joining us. And we understand there's a big debate scheduled today in Parliament over this. Tell us more.
That's right, Maeve. So Italy's Foreign Minister Tajani is going to address Parliament on the government's decision to join Trump's proposed Board of Peace as an observer. Now, this proposal has been described by Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni as, quote, a good solution because it would allow to overcome those constitutional issues that Italy could face as a full member. Tajani had a meeting with Salvini and Meloni yesterday to decide how to present this to Parliament because clearly this is very crucial. The government has come under a lot lot of criticism lately. Tajani said and has repeated that Italy cannot join as a full member because this would go against the Constitution. He pointed to Article 11 of the Constitution, which says that Italy cannot be part of those organizations unless there are conditions of equality with other states, which would not apply here. But Tajani said, quote, that Italy will move forward as the EU. Now, it's interesting because according to reports in the Italian media, it's not yet clear who's going to travel to Washington. It's very possible that Tajani will travel to Washington instead of Meloni as a way for the country to maintain a relatively low profile compared with other countries. German Chancellor Merz is not joining the board and is not traveling to Washington. The EU, as you mentioned, is sending the Commissioner for the Mediterranean, and Greece is sending the Deputy Foreign Minister. So clearly, Italy wants to maintain a low profile, but the main argument is Italy wants to be present no matter what, even symbolically. And this is sending shockwaves through Parliament. Italy's opposition parties say it goes against the Constitution and argue that Italy is the only G7 country that is joining the board even as an observer. And they're saying that there should have been a proper parliamentary debate ahead of this decision. Maeve?
So we should expect some lively discussions today. But of course, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni here, she's trying to hold on to her position, Georgia, as the unofficial interlocutor between the EU and Trump.
Indeed, Maeve. So we know that when it comes to EU-US relations and this special relationship between Trump and Meloni, of course, Meloni has been trying to play this role as a mediator between the two sides. But the context here has slightly changed. I was speaking to a political analyst yesterday who told me that it's interesting to focus on who's not going to be there this time around. Germany is not going to be there. France is not going to be there. The EU said that as an institution, it will not join the board, raising questions over its governance and charter. So clearly it seems that Italy faces a very delicate balancing act here, potentially facing issues both internally and externally. And the question, Maeve, is Meloni still in this role? And is Meloni acting in Italy's interest or the EU's? Well, the answer to that question is not there yet. We'll see what's going to happen. But clearly, according to observers, while consolidating this special relationship with Trump, Meloni should be really careful not to step away from multilateralism and weaken its position within the EU. Maeve?
OK, Georgia Orlandi, our Rome correspondent, thank you so much for that live update. And you mentioned, of course, Commissioner Suissa heading to DC this week. She'll be live with us very soon in the studio to update on that trip. But now, moving on, French President Emmanuel Macron is on a 3-day visit to India to focus on defence, trade and AI. This Tuesday marks 3 weeks to the day since the EU signed the, quote, mother of all deals with powerhouse India. With relations with the current US administration on ice, Brussels was keen to get the deal over the line quickly, a 30-chapter document that took decades to finalise. For the latest, we can now cross over to the Indian embassy right here in Brussels, where our EU News editor Maria Tadeo is standing by for us this morning. Good morning, Maria. What's the latest from the embassy there?
Good morning, Maeve. And of course, India and our strategic relationship to the European Union. And you alluded to the summit taking place, hosted by Prime Minister Modi. But also what is interesting is to see this major European delegation participating to the French president, but also the Spanish Prime Minister among that European delegation. And to debrief, I'm happy to say we're joined by India's ambassador to the EU, Ambassador Kumar. Thank you very much for joining us on Euronews. I have to ask you about the summit in India. But before we get to that point, why this relationship now? Is it a necessity, or is there really strategic thinking between the ties of the EU and India?
No, it definitely is a strategic thinking. We live in a multipolar world today. EU and India are important poles in the configuration. And for us, it is important as two important poles of the multipolar global order to cooperate with each other, and not only for our mutual benefit, but for the global stability also.
And just to pick up on that point, the reason why I asked, is this born out of necessity or is it strategic, is because some would argue there's been much closer ties because of President Trump and the chaos at some point that he's unleashed in some ways with tariffs, not just in India, but also in the European Union. But if I understand correctly, what you're saying is, regardless of who's in the White House, this is a relationship that will grow in time.
India-EU relationship stands on its own feet. Geopolitical environment, of course, has an impact on everything, but our relationship has its own merit.
And on that point, you speak about the relationship. We were in India when this mother of all trade deals was signed. The two sides talked about a deal that is uncommon now in this geopolitical context, and that is a win-win. But for that to become a real win-win, you need to implement it. When are we going to see the deal being implemented, both in the European Union, but also to that extent in India?
We are ready. So as quickly as EU is able to complete its internal processes, we would be in a position to sign the deal.
And do you worry, however, about the speed when it comes to the different levels in Europe? The European Parliament has questions, of course. They always do, and that is part of the democratic process. But is this something that worries you that perhaps by 2027 we'll still talk about a hypothetical deal, not a real deal?
No, we are very confident that the deal would be signed very quickly.
And is there a timeline still that you're working with, a best case scenario?
It would be unfair on my part to speculate timelines. It is really for the European Union to decide. But my understanding is that both the sides would be working fast to see that this deal is signed as quickly as possible.
And Ambassador, this week, as I mentioned at the start, there is a big European delegation in India. There is an AI summit that will be taking place. And of course, the French president is part of that delegation there for 3 days. To me, and I just came back from the Munich Security Conference, there's this term that I hear a lot, and that is de-risking the European economy, both now from China, but also the United States, which is funny and unthinkable a few years ago. What role can India play? Because to me, it seems this is what this trip is about, is de-risking the European economy.
Over-dependencies are not good. There is need to have redundancies built in supply chains, to have multiple options. And the consequences of over-concentration of supply chain, both of the sides, both of us, and in fact the world at large has experienced. So I think the India-EU FTA is very, very important also from the point of view of de-risking our respective economies, building in redundancies, having more manufacturing options. And I think in this respect also, I think the deal would serve a very useful purpose.
And Ambassador, beyond, and of course, this AI summit seems to now signal that this is a relationship that goes not just trade, but is going to go into potential technology and most crucially defense. For India, it is also a geopolitical complex moment in a neighborhood that is difficult to handle. We've seen also India purchase big weapons from the French in particular. Do you look at this relationship as one that becomes almost defensive at some point?
So let me tell you, we have around 20 presidents and prime ministers participating in the AI summit, and of them, 11 are from Europe. So that speaks for itself. Technology and defense, I think, are very, very important area. A lot of progress was made both on the technological front as well as on the defense side during the recently concluded summit, which opens a new phase in India-EU relationship. So you're right in saying that as we go further, defense, particularly defense industries and technological aspect would become more and more critical and important to India-EU relationship.
Well, Ambassador Kumar, thank you very much. Of course, that week and that trip that we'll be monitoring on Euronews, the French president, but also the Spanish prime minister, is a relationship that goes now beyond trade, but interestingly now is becoming more and more defensive with big contracts, of course, for European companies looking to sign in India. Maeve.
Okay, Maria Tadeo, thank you so much for that. And of course to the Ambassador Kumar as well for joining us. Now, after a busy weekend at the Munich Security Conference, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has moved on to Central Europe, namely Budapest. With elections coming up in Hungary in April, Marco Rubio was keen to show his support for current Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who's losing ground in the polls to his opponent, Peter Magyar. For more, our Hungarian correspondent, Sándor Díros, joins me now in the studio. Sándor, bring us up to speed first on this Marco Rubio-Orban get-together in Budapest.
Good morning, Maeve. So first of all, Marco Rubio made a mini trip to Central Europe. He visited Robert Fico in Slovakia, and then he went to Hungary to see Viktor Orban. Those are two Trump-supporting leaders, and they are very, very critical towards Brussels. So this is the ideological context. And for Hungary, it was clearly a campaign visit. He delivered a supportive message to Orban from Donald Trump. He said that the US-Hungarian relations are in a golden era, and this is extremely beneficial to the Hungarians. He said that Hungary could even get a financial package if the country would ever be in trouble. And he framed it, this is only because of the friendship between Trump and Orban. So we don't know whether or not Trump will visit in person Hungary during the campaign. It's not confirmed, but Rubio already delivered a message, and he also said to Orban that we want you to continue. Take a look of what he said.
President Trump is deeply committed to your success because your success is our success. Because this relationship we have here in Central Europe through you is so essential and vital for our national interests in the years to come.
Marco Rubio there. And Shandor, how will President Trump's support for Orban impact the elections? And also tell us, how is Peter Maillard doing? He seems a little bit emboldened after that scandal we discussed just last week.
Well, it's not clear for the moment whether or not Trump's support will impact the Hungarian electoral campaign and the voters. But one thing is sure, that Viktor Orban clearly focuses on foreign affairs. He doesn't deal with domestic issues, but he's always talking about, how the geopolitical instability impacts Hungary, and Hungary needs stability, which he represents. And he often argues that he is friends with Trump. He knows Putin very well, so he's a safe choice. And now talking about the campaign, it's not clear, how this will impact. But there was one very interesting journalistic question at the press conference. They asked Orban whether or not he will give up power if he's losing elections, and here is what he had to say.
I spent 16 years as leader of opposition. What does it mean? It means that sometimes I lose, sometimes I win. So don't afraid what will be if we are not winning, because it's regularly happened here, at least 4 times already.
Viktor Orban there, and before that was our Shandor Zeros reporting. But now, it is time to park politics for a moment and focus on something completely different, a topic that might tickle your curiosity if you dream of a European career in the EU institutions. This year's EPSO is finally opening its largest recruitment drive ever. Letizia Battista and Jakob Janis report.
Is 7 a big number? Taking 7 months to land a job in the EU quarter is sometimes considered a speedrun, but a 7-year wait for the EU's biggest job exam, that's an eternity. And it has been 7 years since the last massive general entry-level recruitment exam for the EU institutions. And all EU citizens are welcome to apply, but the competition is fierce. So before you pack your bags for Brussels, here is your survival guide to Europe's most elite exam. About 50,000 people are expected to apply before the 10th of March deadline, so get in line. And there are only 1,400 spots, meaning the success rate is a brutal 3%. Ouch! And to win, candidates must survive rigorous online tests in reasoning and in deep EU knowledge. But the prize is a famous EU contract for life, with a starting salary of nearly 6,000 euros. And that money is subject to internal EU institutions tax, but completely exempt from national income taxes. However, the testing system itself is quite controversial. Recent tech glitches and AI translation errors actually voided 10,000 exam results. And that's a lot. Finally, the results show a geographic imbalance. 15 countries, including Poland and Germany, are simply not getting a fair share of EU jobs based on their population size. So, does this whole setup even make sense anymore? In a recent Euronews survey, most respondents actually said no to the idea of EU jobs for life, arguing they shouldn't depend on a single one-off exam. But if you are taking the test this March, good luck! And let's just hope the exam's AI translator is having a good day this time.
Well, that does bring this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for your company. As always, see you again tomorrow, same place and same time.